Hello everybody, this is Niclas Huschenbeth and today I'm doing a match against one of my patrons. So some of you might be aware that I recently started this Patreon campaign. If not, you can go to the description and go to my Patreon website. So it's a website where people can support me for me to reach a specific goal. That goal is to do once a month an interview with a strong grandmaster. So one of the rewards for supporting a specific amount is to play a little match of one or several games against me. And today I'm playing my first match against one of my patrons, and it's a 10-minute game. So we got it all set up. My opponent's waiting, so I think we're just gonna start right now. And as the game progresses, of course, I will comment on it and will try to do my best to point out any mistakes or ways for my opponent to play better. And hopefully at the same time, I'm also going to perform decently. So we'll see how this goes. This is my first time doing this, and we're having a Scandinavian here. And my opponent plays right solely with queen back to d8. There are two other moves, queen a5 and queen d6 instead. And here I know most of the time people play bishop g4. Actually, recently I had a game just last October at the Muenden Chess Open in Las Vegas where this is what my opponent played. My opponent took on f3, which is usually what people do, and then queen takes f3, c6. It's a very solid approach. The drawback of dropping back to h5 is that I can continue to expand here on the queen side, king side, play g4, which is so typical in the Scandinavian. You push the bishop back once with h3, and then if the bishop goes to h5, you push it back again, and then you usually follow with knight e5. This is quite strong. And now suddenly there are ideas like h4, h5 to further harass this bishop on g6. And also if I want to, I can play bishop g2, develop my bishop on the long diagonal. So there are a lot of advantages to it, and to me it seems rather unpleasant for black here. Obviously black can try to get rid of my knight by playing knight bd7, but at the same time I'm not obliged to take on g6 or take on d7, but can just keep my knight on e5 and maybe even play f4 and hope to take back with the f pawn on e5 if black decides to take on e5. So this seems rather comfortable for me because black will have some difficulties with this bishop, and also there's sometimes g5, a lot of different ideas here. So I'm able to put on pressure on the black position early on. I do expect knight bd7. Okay, e6 also very decent, of course. Now the question is, do I want to go h4 immediately or play bishop g2 first? I think I will play bishop g2 first. The reason is that black has to react to this threat of bishop takes b7. So black has to react, and after, let's say, a move like c6, c6 seems to be the most logical move to prevent bishop takes b7, then I can follow up with h4, and by playing bishop g2 I took away the square on e4 for the bishop. So now I play h4, bishop e4 is not possible anymore, so it's difficult for the bishop to find a place to go. And now we see this whole idea of h3, g4, knight e5. Now I'm threatening h5, and black really doesn't have a good way to cope with this threat. Natural move would be to play h6 or h5, but then I can take on g6 and black would need to take back with the f pawn, which is pretty ugly and leaves a lot of weak pawns in the black position. My opponent played bishop d6, and I think I can play h5 here and get away with this. Yes, it looks like h5 is winning a piece now. The bishop is out of squares, right? So the only variation I had to calculate is bishop takes e5 and then d takes e5, and if anything is happening there. But it doesn't look like it is, especially after d takes e5. This knight on f6 is also attacked. So now my opponent has given up the bishop, Now queen takes e2, d takes e5. And well, black can get another pawn on g4, but it's just not enough compensation here for a whole piece. And also this knight on g4 might be in trouble. Well, actually maybe not too much trouble. I was thinking about queen e4 and attacking a knight, but a knight still can retreat to h6. At the same time, I would like to get a knight in on d6. Knight e4 comes to mind, but black just takes on e5 for now, and doesn't seem like the most powerful continuation. So I will take a little bit of time here to find the most accurate continuation. Another move which makes a lot of sense, just bishop f4. But then there might be queen d4. Maybe. Okay, I'll stick with queen e4 because the queen is very nicely placed on e4. Usually if you can centralize your queen like that, so centralizing means putting out one of the 4 central squares, e4, d4, e5 and d5, then in a lot of situations makes sense if the queen cannot be attacked or pushed away. And now I'm just going to take on h6 so the knight doesn't come to f5, and now I'm going to play rook d1, rook d1, queen g5. It's really a pity that my knight cannot come to d6 quite yet. So I would like to open up this possibility by moving my queen, but at the same time my king is also a little bit loose still. So rook d1, queen g5. How about I play queen g4. I take control of the g5 square and I also prevent rook g8. Also having the idea queen g7 possibly, and opening up this possibility of knight e4. And I think queen g5 is the best move, but now I can just take and now bring my knight to e4. We enter in an endgame. My king is not in any danger, of course, in the endgame without the queens. And I have beautiful squares on f6 and d6 for my knight. h6, that makes sense, protecting a pawn. And now I can go to d6 and take the pawn on b7. But I think I'd rather go knight f6 and just try to control or prevent rather black from developing the knight, because if the knight develops now, then I can play rook to d7 and the rook will be very strong in the 7th rank. So now I can bring the rook to d7. And the question is how to increase the pressure here. I think I'm just going to pick up this pawn, but hold on, there's knight c5 and then knight d3, knight takes e5. I think I spotted something good here. I just played a natural move, rook h1. And if now knight c5, I can play rook d8. Take, 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 king g7. Well, I could just take on h8, but that would be rather boring. I think I have the nice move knight e8. Maybe. We'll see. Oh, no, I don't. Well, I do have the move, but not in a way in which I intended it to. So let's see. Maybe I can still. Let's just see what happens. Okay. let's just find out. So I play rook d8, take, take, king g7 is forced. Now I play knight e8. And if king h7, I want to play bishop e4 until I noticed that the knight controls the square, but I can maybe prepare with b4. But king f8 might be a stronger move because it looks pretty, but I don't have a strong follow-up here. If I play b4, my opponent could play king e7, knight d6, another move. It looks like I'm just going for the boring way here, exchanging the rooks, and then king d2, so I don't run into knight d3, and I will just try to convert this position. Which actually didn't turn out as well as I was hoping it would, because after all, black has still 2 pawns for the piece, so I didn't make much progress, and my opponent kind of got out of it, but the position is still lost, because there's just not much black can do with the 2 pawns. I have a lot of control over position, and it's just a matter of technique to convert this here. But it's true, I made it more difficult on myself than I had to. Okay, let's bring the knight over to d6 and put some pressure on this pawn on b7. If knight d7, I can protect the pawn at e5 by playing king d4. So b6. And now I'll still play king d4 just in case. And now I can just take on c6. Also another plan would have been to play knight c8 and pick up one of those 2 pawns on a7 or b6. And now I'm going for the f7 pawn. Also notice that the knight is kind of controlled now on b8. I also thought about putting my bishop on b5, which is the typical kind of distance between bishop and knight, where the bishop controls the knight completely. Or in some situations could be also the other way around, the knight controls the bishop completely. So f5 I took en passant, and now I can bring my king into action, and there's really not much black can do here. a5, now I will just play b5, and the knight is completely paralyzed on b8, cannot move at all. And in fact, oh, f7. Well, in fact, I wanna. I'm kind of putting black in a Zugzwang here because black is really running out of squares or moves to play. Sacrifice the pawn now on g3, and now I can just play a3. And well, if king g7, then I can go to e7 and then queen the next move. And the other only possible move would be to move the knight, but then I can just take the knight as well. So there's nothing here that black can do anymore. Alright, and my opponent resigned. So let's go over the game real quick and see the critical moments. So in the opening, the Scandinavian, knight f6, knight f3, bishop g4, h3, and here I think bishop h5 might be already not the best choice, because it really leads to this position where I get a lot of space and I can immediately put on pressure on the black position. So usually people take on f3 here, don't take on d4, that's a little bit too dangerous, but play c6, now bishop e3, e6, and just stand, very solid position, castle, and I think bishop b4 here. This one line I remember, knight e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, queen d5. Now exchanging queens as well. Still, white is better here because of the bishop pair, but black has good chance to defend and hold this position. So after g4, bishop g6, knight e5, e6. He may be trying to get rid of this knight right away by playing knight bd7, could be another option, but still I can play bishop g2, c6, and now maybe a move like queen e2. It looks unpleasant for black. But maybe something like this works here. Knight takes e5, d takes e5, knight d5, but not really. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. So what happened in the game was e6, bishop g2, c6, h4. Now bishop d6 loses the bishop on g6. So what other options does black have here? Maybe bishop b4. I think that's a typical way to still get out of this situation by creating space on e4 for the bishop. So if now h5, then bishop e4 is possible and black has escaped. And if black gets out of this then also the pawns on the king side can be a little bit weak. And white doesn't maybe find a safe spot for the king. But instead of h5, maybe I have a different move here as well. But maybe not. I would like to play a move like bishop d2 or queen e2, but in both cases the pawn on d4 might be hanging because of queen takes d4. So it looks like bishop b4 was the way to go here. I can't see a really strong continuation here. I'm thinking about a move like f3, but I feel like this is not the right way to play. Just my intuition tells me this is not the way to go. So bishop b4 was probably the best way, and then after bishop d6, really there's not much black can do here. This position is lost. I maybe didn't play super accurately in the endgame and made it a little bit more difficult for me than I needed to, but it didn't change anything. The position was winning from here till the very end. Alright, so thanks for my patron here for supporting me, and I hope this match, or this game rather, and this analysis was useful. And for all you other guys, if you want to check this out, you can go to my Patreon page in the description and support me if you want to. And then I'll see you some other time. Goodbye.